All right, so hi everyone. My name is Pam Clough, and I am an advocate with Environment Washington. So our work at Environment Washington tackles issues that stem from a way of living that's damaging the natural world. And through policy change, we work to protect our air, water, natural spaces, and work towards a livable climate. We're a proud member of the Plastic Free Washington Coalition, and that is made up of a number of environmental and community organizations throughout the state that are centered, that our work is centered to eliminate plastic and move towards a zero waste future. And so I'm grateful for Puget Soundkeeper, Zero Waste Washington, and Washburn students for co-sponsoring these workshops, and the many volunteers that are part of our coalition as well that helped conceptualize this workshop series, promote it, and pull it together. So I will just kick us off with a quick intro, then I'll pass it over to Bailey and then Heather for the bulk of our presentation tonight. So let's dive into it. Yeah, I'll make it, just to, here, let's see if I can change my slides. All right, yes. This comes at no surprise. We have a plastic problem. I think all of us experience this issue firsthand, whether that's through litter in our communities. This photo on the slide here is one that I actually took on a backpacking trip in Washington State to a remote corner of the Olympic coast. Just even a couple weeks ago, I worked with Bailey and the UW chapter of Washburn to organize a park cleanup, and we picked up over 128 pounds of trash. So I think we all have our stories of how we just see this in our daily lives. And we see these issues because our economy encourages us to make, use, and toss at a very rapid speed, and that creates massive environmental and public health impacts in the process, from greenhouse gas emissions to toxic air pollutants and from landfilling and trash incineration, and just to the litter that we see every day clogging our waterways and are harming wildlife. And so this is a linear materials economy model. But what we need to be doing is shifting away from this wasteful, polluting, and costly linear system to a circular materials economy, moving towards zero waste, conserving natural resources, limiting pollution and global warming emissions. And I know that we can do this, and we've already started taking steps in this direction. And so Heather will definitely speak more to some of the progress that we've made in Washington. And the solutions that we're working on to continue to tackle this. But before I pass it over to Heather, I am going to pass it to Bailey Cunningham, who's the Earth and Energy Campaign Director with the Washburn UW chapter, and she'll share more about what are these workshops all about, why specifically young people have a role to play in these efforts, and I'm excited to share more about that. So yeah, Bailey.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for everyone's help putting on these workshops. We're so excited to be here. So starting off, we are a student group at the University of Washington, and we focus on advocating for systemic change to support the environment in the Washington State Legislature. So we've got our student group with us here today. I'll have everyone wave. Can you see everyone? So we are in coalition with Environment Washington, Zero Waste Washington within this Plastic Free Washington Coalition, and our goal is to address the plastic waste issue. And we're addressing this issue not only because of the physical litter it creates and the damage it does on ecosystems, but also because it is a climate issue. This system that Pam was talking about, where we extract, the extraction system rather than a circular system, creates CO2 and other harmful chemicals that contribute to climate change. But legislators have the power to pass systemic policies to reduce this waste and to protect our climate. And it's the decisions that we believe our generation has the power to impact decisions made and make a better world for future generations. So we've spent a lot of time lobbying for legislative change in Washington state, and we've noticed that student voices really do have an impact on legislators' decisions. For example, we hold a lobby day every year, and student activists get to meet in person with legislators to advocate for the policies that we're supporting. Another example is that our sister chapter at Evergreen College in Olympia wrote letters to representatives, and Representative Doglio said that she keeps all of these letters on her desk to encourage her to keep fighting to help the environment by passing legislation to make producers responsible for their plastic waste. Another example is when a high school student group from Port Townsend, Washington, they went to Olympia to lobby for an environmental bill that legislators were previously on the fence about. And we heard back from multiple legislators that the student involvement and hearing student voices of the youth and of the next generation was actually what was the turning point in encouraging them to fight harder to pass the bill. So overall, student voices are powerful change makers, and the point of this workshop is to empower the youth to get involved in the political process, to share our voices with our legislators and our representatives, so that we can implement solutions in Washington from a systemic base. The techniques and tactics we can employ to get things done will be learned in this 4-part series of workshops, and today's presentation will be the first, in which we'll share more about these ways we can get involved in the political system. So with that, I'll pass it over to Heather Trim, who is the Executive Director of Zero Waste Washington. Heather is a leading expert on waste reduction in Washington state and has extensive background on toxic chemicals and plastic. After earning her PhD in geochemistry, she has worked in the environmental advocacy space on many issues ranging from shoreline habitat, stormwater pollution, and many other issues related to land use. Heather's been active in advancing zero waste solutions for decades in Washington state, and we'll hear more about that soon. So welcome, Heather.
Thank you so much for such a nice introduction. Hi, everybody. So very excited to be here, and I will get right into it. As mentioned by Pam, we have the Plastic Free Washington, Washington's and Plastico Coalition in Washington, working, and the groups at the bottom are the leading sort of steering committee groups for this coalition. So the work that I'm going to talk about is all kind of under that group's work recently. So I wanted to start with the bill that passed just now in April, was signed into law by the governor, because this bill is great. It has all sorts of good things to help reduce plastics, and it didn't get that much press, so you may not have heard about it. This was led by Representative Charlotte Mena, who was a brand new legislator from Tacoma, who was awesome. She is also, but her day job is to be a federal lobbyist for the Department of Ecology. So she really knew the ropes. And when she came in, she was able to immediately start negotiating bills and get bills passed. Very unusual for a first-year legislator. So in this bill, the first thing is that in the state building code, for all new buildings, and that's everything from skyscrapers to community buildings to schools to hospitals, any building that requires a water faucet based on the number of people using that building and things like that will now be required to have a water refill station as well. That will kick in July 1, 2026. Then also, the second thing is hotel mini toiletries. So that's your little shampoo and your conditioner, things like that, will be phased out. Plastic packaging will be phased out at hotels by January 1, 2027 for the larger hotels and 28 for the smaller ones. And then finally, we're going to work on, or there's going to be a study on styrofoam filled floats, which I'm going to show you because it's easier to explain than to say in a few words. So the black things that you see on the left, they kind of look like coffins, are called floats, and they hold up docks in our lakes, in our marine waters all around the entire world, and they are filled with styrofoam, EPS, and expanded polystyrene. There are some that are filled with air, but they're not very good. They're flimsy and they have holes in them, so they don't work well. And the people who make the docks don't want to use them. So we want to deal with these, or basically either get them to be a lot better or get them to not be filled with styrofoam and have a better solution. Here's the problem. This is a close-up, and you can see a crack in one of these floats, and they only have a warranty of 10 to 15 to 20 years. And then they get hit by boats, props, bad weather, etc., and they crack, and the styrofoam starts to leak out. So here's a photo I took of a beach, and I'm sure if you've done any beach cleanups, you've seen this. This is in the rack, excuse me, which is the stuff that accumulates at the sort of the tide line in the beaches in Puget Sound. And these little, where I have the red arrows, are little single niblets of styrofoam, but you can see there are actually quite a few more. I only put in some red arrows, and I have and then here's the same stuff, the styrofoam leaking out in a marina. So what this law will do is require a study to see if we can get better floats. And by highlighting this issue in Washington, it has now become an issue that other states are working on as well. This has kind of been under the radar, this particular topic. Okay, so let's move into the plastics issue, which you already heard some about already, and you all probably are pretty well aware of, but let me give you a few stats. So this is from the United Nations, so this is very credible, that we are on the pathway to having 1 pound of plastic for every 3 pounds of biomass. So not just fish, but other organisms in our oceans. And we are just dumping plastic in at a rapid clip, and it hasn't really slowed down at all. In fact, it's increasing around the globe. This is an out-of-date slide, but the same sort of concept of it only is worse now. We have an exponential increase in the global production of plastic resins. So this has only happened in recent years. And so this is another way of looking at it, which is from 1950 to 2015, this is the global plastic production by sector. And so where it's used. And you can see that the bottom blue there, but I just want to point out, you can see the recession in 1975, you can see the recession in the 2000s, and once this graph gets pulled out to include COVID, you're going to see another blips going on. So the unfortunately, for better or for worse, the plastic use around the world very much mirrors our economy. So the blue at the bottom is packaging. Between 30 and 40% of the plastic used around the world is packaging. And this is stuff that we use for just a short period of time and then dispose of. Packaging has a very, very broad definition. It's everything from plastic bottles to bags, to the wrap around your toilet paper, to candy wrappers, to the little veggie sticker. All of those things are considered packaging. So it's a very large category. And unfortunately, it's a category of stuff that isn't used very long. All of the items in this slide are items that cannot be recycled in our current recycling system. They are made of multi-materials. So if you look at the chip bags or the bags in the top left, these are plastics and foil and sometimes paper that are laminated together, sometimes up to 9 very, very, very fine layers that are laminated together. And they're different resins. They have different properties and they can't be recycled. Our system is trying to sort things into the same thing, paper, plastic, and then this specific type of plastic like PET. The bottom right is it looks like a can, but it's actually a plastic can like thing and a metal top welded together or attached together. So that cannot be recycled as well in our current system. Our consumers are very confused about what can and cannot be recycled. A lot of people try to put styrofoam in the recycling bin. Styrofoam should not go in the recycling bin. And the reason is that in the recycling process and even in the trucks, the styrofoam breaks up into little pieces and then it gets all over everything and becomes a complete contamination of all these other materials. Then also all these different types of wrap that you can see photos of on the right should not go in the recycling bin, because what happens is in the recycling facility where they're sorting everything, they have these huge metal rollers and the rollers are going around and the plastic catches on these rollers and clogs the rollers, so that once a shift, so about every 8 hours, they have to go in for like an hour and cut all the plastic off the rollers so that the facility can run. So they have to close down the entire facility to unclog these rollers, and it's also very dangerous for the workers. So that's why if you wondered why you can't put plastic in the recycling system, that is why. You may have heard that China in 2018 basically said, nope, we're not going to take the waste of the world. This graph, and you can sort of see, it's hard to see on the left, 85 other countries. So this big blob on the left are all the different exports that were going to China. The US was number 2 prior to 2018. So for about 2 decades, we were being very sloppy here in the US, sending our stuff to China. And China basically closed the door and said, no, we're not going to do it anymore. We want to have our own circular economy, and we also want to have a cleaner environment. And so this has caused a reckoning here in the Pacific Northwest, but really all around the world. What are we going to do about our recycling system? We've got to clean up our act, because China is no longer going to just take it all like they did for several decades. So in Washington State, this is our recovery rate, which is very similar to our recycling rate for consumer products. And we were one of the best in the country. Our recycling rate was going up and up and up, and it peaked in 2011. And then since then, we have been on a declining trend. And we are now between number 10 and number 15 in the US in terms of our recycling rate. So we've slipped badly, and it's sort of stagnated. This is hot off the press. This is not public yet. This is a draft document showing specifically what is going to the landfill in Washington. So the dark green in each of these bars is what's going to the landfill or our incinerator, and the light green is what is actually being recycled. So you can see that paper and cardboard, which is the first bar, has more going to recycling than to the landfill. But then everything else has a different story. So the rigid plastics, and that's things like your yogurt tubs and your soda pop bottles and things like that, all that you can see more is going to the landfill. And then the next item, which is total flexible packaging, that's your chip bags. That's that slide I showed you before of all those different things that are laminated together. So your chip bags, anything that is a pouch, like baby food pouches, coffee pouches, all that. Then you have your glass, which is 50-50 more or less, well, 40%. And then you have metals, which is also not quite as bad. But you can see the challenge we have in this hot off the press graph. This shows our recycling is getting worse, and the cost for that recycling is going up. So since 2015, the increase to the homeowners, or this is to households that is, has increased 36% on average. And this is for the UTC, that's the Utilities and Transportation Commission. It's essentially the unincorporated areas of the state. And the same trend is seen in the cities as well. So we've had an increased cost and a decrease in the recycling services that we're getting. So what this means is a lot of the different municipalities have said, I guess we aren't going to do things quite like that anymore. So in King County, they have reduced the materials collected curbside, recycling materials. In Tacoma, they implemented recycling surcharges, and you can see those surcharges in the orange box on the right. In Spokane, they reduced the recycling collection frequency. And in some places, like Franklin County, they've just simply said, no more curbside recycling. We're not going to do it anymore at all. The costs are not working out for us, because a lot of the local governments are having big challenges with their budgets. So what this means is that there's a real discrepancy across the state about what kind of access people have to curbside recycling. In the Puget Sound, which is the teal color in the middle, all the households have access to curbside recycling. They may have to pay extra for it, so they may not be getting it because they choose not to, but they have access. In the rest of the state, it's really, really across the board. And here's the kicker. We are sending $104 million worth of valuable items that could have been recycled into the landfill, and they could have gone back into the economy. So that's every year we're sending $104 million that we're just throwing away, which is crazy. The Department of Ecology, which if you're not familiar with, it's like our state level EPA, do a really terrific waste characterization study every 5 years. that is done by a local consulting firm, Cascadia, and it's really, really, really well done. They do all 4 seasons and they do all different sectors. So this is one of the graphs from that report. And this is material going to the landfill, not recycling. This is what's going to the landfill or the incinerator. And you can see the organic material, which we'll touch on briefly later, is number 1. That's yard waste and food waste. But packaging is really high up there. And this is all stuff, for the most part, that really should otherwise be recycled or reduced or reused, reuse system. So people say all the time, why do you even want it to go to the landfill? I mean, why not let it go to the landfill? What's the big deal? And we have 2 answers for that. One is we want the material to not be coming from the planet anymore. We have limited resources in the planet and we want to really reduce that. So that's item 1. And the other is that you actually save a lot of energy. So from a climate change perspective, if you recycle items rather than using the virgin or the raw materials. So let's take aluminum, the top line here. That raw material is bauxite ore, which is mined in other countries and often with very problematic labor standards. But just forget that for the moment and just look at the energy savings, the very high energy savings if you remelt the can than if you have to go with the ore. You can remelt it, for example, at a lower temperature. You don't have the impurities, and so you're able to do it at a lower temperature. Plastic is number 2, which I thought was really interesting when I saw this. So plastic, as you all probably know, comes from oil and gas. And it's a lot better from a greenhouse gas perspective to recycle that plastic bottle than to make a new one from oil and gas, and so on down the line. Okay, so back to the plastic-free, Washington Plastic-Free Coalition. So we have 2 main objectives to solve our plastics and recycling crisis. 1, reduce the use of unnecessary plastics. So, for example, bring your own bag, bring your own coffee cup, things like that. And then secondly, for the material that we can't reduce, let's build markets and restore our recycling system here in Washington, creating local jobs. Excuse me, creating local jobs. So in the past few years, in addition to the plastics bill that I mentioned earlier, Rep. Mena's bill, we did work with a lot of people. All these are all with a lot of partners and a lot of people. These do not happen on their own. First was the reusable bag bill that was led by Senator Mona Das, who was from Kent, and Representative Strom Peterson, who's from Edmonds. This took 2 years, and the goal was to get people to bring their own bag. And whoops, I guess that's all I have on that. And it was, at the time, the best in the nation bag bill that passed. I think it was number 8 bag bill in the country. So then the next year after that bag bill was passed, we then worked again with Senator Mona Das and then Rep. Liz Berry, who's from Seattle, on a bill that has a long name, but basically it's about modernizing the recycling system. Now, that was the year of COVID. So this was a year of being told by legislators, this was 2021. So this is people like the legislature was completely freaked out because they were worried about the budget for the state, and they were worried about public health, and they were worried about other issues that were also very important. So, for example, police things, I won't even use the word for it, and racial equity. So they said, we do not want you to do a big bill. So pretty quickly, that bill pivoted to be a smaller bill. And that smaller bill is still actually a bill that's really great. So if you start on the bottom left-hand corner, number 1 is this bill bans expanded polystyrene, which is styrofoam, food container packaging and coolers. And that's going to start next July 1, so July 1, 2024. And styrofoam packing peanuts already went into effect. Those are banned for sale in Washington. Now, someone can still ship you a box that has styrofoam in it, but it can't originate from Washington. And they can't, if you go to the store, you cannot buy. If you do, let us know so we can go after them, any styrofoam peanuts anymore. The number 2, top left, is that when you go to a coffee stand or a restaurant or even your school's cafeterias, they are not allowed to give you single-use utensils, straws, condiment packs, or cold beverage lids without asking if you want it or they can leave it out on the counter and you can grab. The idea is not to say a ban on these things, but just get the ones you need, because maybe some of you, like me, have a drawer full of plastic forks that you don't want to throw out, but you've been accumulating over the years. Number 3 is removing the requirement that you have to have the chasing arrow symbol on the rigid plastic packaging, like a yogurt container and things like that. And then number 4 is minimum recycled content for beverage containers, personal care and cleaning products, and trash bags. So this is where we're trying to get the circular economy. So we want people to make new bottles out of old bottles. That's what that's about. Okay, so last session, we worked with Rep. Berry and Senator Christine Rolfes, and I'm so sad to cross her name off because she was so great, on the RAP Act. And that's what I'm going to talk about next. And that's what we're talking about in terms of reintroducing this coming year. So Senator Rolfes was, in my mind, the most powerful woman in the Senate. She was terrific. And she was the head of the Ways and Means Committee, which is basically the money committee. And a lot of lobbyists were quite afraid of her. Unfortunately for us, but fortunately for her, she stepped down and was appointed onto the Kitsap County Council, which is a 3-person commission. And she'll be able to do a lot of good things for the environment in her new position, but it was very sad because she was such a she really cared about recycling, and she was really terrific. Anyway, Liz Berry is also really terrific, so I don't want to downgrade how great she is. She is amazing, and she's been negotiating on this bill all summer. It has been really intense. I think I got 5 texts from her today on one piece of the bill. Just to give you a little bit of a history, and I kind of already went into this. So we had the 2019 bill that did the 3 things that I already mentioned. We had the 2021 bill. Oh, wait, nope, sorry. 2019 was an earlier bill that was led by Senator Rolfes that basically got simplified down to be a study to look at these plastic packaging, what to do about it. Then the bill in 2021 that I mentioned that Rep. Mena and Rep. Berry and Senator Doss led, which was that 4 items that I showed you on that one map. Then we had the Renew Act, and then earlier this year we had the RAP Act. So this is just to give you a quick synopsis of the bills. Hot off the press and only draft at this point, so we can't really be saying this publicly yet, but we can tell you guys, is a brand new survey that surveyed over 2,000 people in Washington, so that's statistically relevant, and did do a pretty good job of reaching BIPOC communities. Is a survey asking people about recycling and about waste prevention and about bottle deposit, a bottle bill. The thing to note from this is that these numbers are off the chart high. When you do surveying, you never get numbers this high. You're very happy if you get numbers that are greater than 60% for something that you're surveying on. So these numbers, 76% are rating recycling as very important. 86% agree that everyone in Washington should have access to recycling. 86% agree reducing waste is important. 82 agree that Washington should be able to, can't read it because it's hidden here, recycle the same items regardless of where they live. And 78% agree that recycling should be free for everyone. Now, you might say, well, these are the kind of things that almost everyone would say yes to. But the reality is that actually is not the case. You can have things that seem really good, and people still will say no because they're worried about other factors related to it. But these are off the chart numbers, and this is only about half of the stats from that report. So just to give you an idea on that. Okay. Now, what we're talking about in the RAP Act is extended producer responsibility. That's where the manufacturers are paying for the end of life. They're basically paying for the recycling, and they're motivated to redesign their packaging so that it is easy to recycle or reduce. This concept for packaging has been in place since the early 90s. Germany was the first country in 1991. And what you can see here with the colors are all the other countries around the world who had programs in place or frameworks in place for extended producer responsibility. And you can see that the United States is gray. We do not have it. There are 4 states Oregon, Maine, Colorado, and California that have passed laws in the last few years, and we want Washington to be number 5. Here are some of the brands that would be paying for recycling. So recycling would essentially be free for everyone in Washington if this passes, and the brands would be paying for it, and they would be highly motivated to reduce their packaging because they pay by the pound. So the less packaging they have, think about Amazon here, the less packaging that Amazon is sending you in your home, the less they would have to pay. And these companies these are international brands. They've been paying in Europe and in Canada for a long time, and they're not paying in the United States just now, those other 4 states. So this is an outcomes-based bill. So the idea is increased reuse and recycling, universal and convenient recycling services for all, meaning recycling for everyone for free or basically free, and then responsible recycling, meaning where are the materials going once they go out of that recycling facility? Are they really being recycled? Now, a component of the bill, like I mentioned before, in terms of the previous bill, is minimum recycled content. So those are the items you can see across the top that are already in place for Washington: beverage containers, personal care and cleanser, and trash bags. The WRAP Act would include additional packaging types, and you can see those across the bottom. So clamshells, yogurt type containers, PET cups, and nursery planters and things like that. Those would also be included for requiring that they use recycled content. And this is, again, this is to drive the market, so that there's a place to send all those recyclables when they come out of the end of the pipe. Now, the WRAP Act last year, or earlier this year in 2023, included a bottle bill. The bottle bill part of the bill has now been broken out and is going to be its own bill, led by Representative Monica Stonier, who is from the Vancouver, Clark County area of our state. And the idea behind the bottle bill is that it would be for all your beverage containers, so your beer, your wine, your soda, your water, in my case, my kombucha, would have a 10-cent deposit that you'd pay when you buy it, and then you get your 10 cents back. And the way it would work primarily is through a bag drop system. And this is an example from up in British Columbia that works really, really well. So you would be able to put all your bags in, all your bottles and containers into a bag, put a sticker on it that has your account number on it, because you'll have an online account, and then that just gets credited automatically to your account. And you can also use it as a savings plan, and parents can use it as a college. In Oregon, they use it, they can put money for a college plan into it, and then also they can be donated to charities. The unredeemed refunds would go to, and also the distributors and producers of the beverage containers would fund the infrastructure, the recycling and all that. So it's a pretty circular system. Okay, I want to just conclude with, so I've been mentioning these 2 specific bills, and these are the bills that really are the focus of the advocacy training, which is the WRAP Act and DRS. That stands for Deposit Return System, or the bottle bill. Then all these other bills are other zero waste bills that are being prepared right now. So one is organics, which is mandatory composting across the state. The next one is right to repair, meaning the manufacturers would give the public and small little repair shops the specs, the tools, and the parts to repair things like cell phones and laptops with the actual manufacturer parts. A plastics bill, which we're still working on the details on, may or may not happen. A EV, electronic vehicle battery recycling program, wind turbine blade recycling, light bulb recycling, hydrofluorocarbon or refrigerant gas recycling, PFAS, which is the forever chemical, the Teflon chemical in sludge, which is being spread on our farms across the state. And then finally, cannabis waste. So I'm happy to answer any questions on that. I didn't want to end without at least mentioning all the other bills related to reducing impacts. Okay, so thank you all very much. And I think we have time for some questions, Pam, right? And comments as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great.
Yeah, well, questions, comments, and then we'll leave the last few minutes for, just giving a preview of some of the other workshops that we'll be running. So yeah, are there any questions from anyone in the group about producer responsibility, other issues? that Heather presented on today.
And one way of looking at this, if you were to go explain to a friend what the bill does, could you do that? And if you can't, ask me a question about what you think you didn't quite catch.
It looks like we have someone standing up in the Washburn room.
Oh, good. And then Anna has a question as well.
Hello. So in your presentation, you mentioned that I think it was $104 million is lost through the materials that aren't recycled, but it's also going to cost money to recycle them. And so I wanted to know like how that sort of compares and what plans these bills have in place in order to reduce the cost of recycling and make it efficient.
Great question. So the $104 million is the value, the commodity value when you're at the end of the recycling system, you're selling them. So you're right. That is that's the revenue that we're losing, and the costs are going to be borne for the recycling by the manufacturers. So we, the consumers, won't have to be increasing our recycling bills, but the calculation that was done to create that 104 million also figured out that it was about 60 to 80 million dollars more revenue that would go to the waste industry. So they have not only, so it's good for the waste industry. They will get more because it'll be recycling for everyone. Then they will get more jobs because they'll have to have more trucks, and they'll have more people who can work in the facilities to sort stuff and get everything fixed. And the whole system, it all ricochets all the way up. So it is basically a job builder for Washington. But again, all paid for, which they're not doing right now. They're not paying a penny by the manufacturers. So those brands that I was showing you. So you're right. It's not free.